I love tools, and I especially love Cool Prepper tools, and everyone should have at least one of these, especially if you're a prepper. Hey Provident Preppers, I'm Jonathan, and losing the contents of a fridge or a freezer is horrible. But it's even worse when you don't know that it's happened until you open the door and find a pile of yuck. And it's worse still if we're in a time of crisis and you need that resource and now it's gone. So today we're talking about fridge and freezer monitors, and they're called fridge and freezer monitors, but you can use them for all kinds of things. I use them in root cellars. I use them it can be used in a greenhouse, in a building, in our freezers, of course, and in our fridges. That's their main purpose. But there's another purpose that I think is super awesome that's just as important, and we're going to talk about that at the end, so stay with us. Let's talk about how they work. For this particular unit, and choose whatever unit works for you. I'm not promoting one over the other. There's a whole bunch of them online, and you can even get them with Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. I don't really care about that stuff. What I'm holding in my hand are the sending units. These are the ones that are measuring the temperature, and they're sending it to this receiving unit. Now, this receiving unit you can see has number 2. This is number 1. You've got one sending unit here, one sending unit here, and you've got the base unit, which is here. And this is measuring temperature. So you can see the temperatures of all three, the monitoring unit and the sending units. It also tells you the minimum and the maximum that they've had. One of the cool features and one of the important features is that they have alarms, so that if you get below a certain temperature or above a certain temperature, it's going to let you know. It's going to ring so that you know that something's out of kilter. Now, speaking of alarms, I had one of these sitting in our bedroom window because it was reading the 2 root cellars outside. Turns out the battery went bad in it at 3 in the morning, and it sounded this horrible alarm. I mean, just this screeching alarm. And it took us a couple of minutes. First of all, we were dead asleep. We wake up, we can't tell where this sound is coming from. Finally, we figured out it was in the window, and that receiving unit had the battery was below its threshold limit, and so it started howling. My wife was not very happy with me. Just make sure you keep good batteries in there so that doesn't happen to you. Now, let's talk about some of the uses of these. We've already talked a little bit. You could use it in a greenhouse. Like I said, I've used it in root cellars, fridges, freezers, in a building, wherever you need to know temperatures, and especially in a place where you need to know if it's below a certain temperature or above a certain temperature. And these have a wide range. These units go from -40 Fahrenheit up to 140. So that covers pretty much all of us and the uses that we would need. This one goes from 14 degrees Fahrenheit to 140. So, and usually this is going to be in your house. Now, these things have several ways they can mount. These sending units, they have a little spring-loaded clip. I like to clip that on the basket in the freezer. Sometimes I'll just lay it like in the root cellars. They just lay in there on a surface. They also have a little slotted hole here so that you can put a screw in the wall or a nail in the wall and hang it. So that's how these work. This one actually has the slotted hole as well. Also has a kickstand, which is what I use on my desk in my office, and it also has these magnets, because normally these could be mounted on a fridge or a freezer, and it just sticks on there and does its thing. Another thing you should be interested in is the range of this. Now, this particular package has a range of more than 300 feet, but that's in open air. That's just straight line through air. So if you're going through walls or such, you're probably more down around 40 or 50 feet. So just keep that in mind. Now, we've talked about these fridge and freezer monitors and why everyone should have one, but there's another important reason that you want one of these fridge and freezer monitors, and that is during the time of crisis. If the grid is down and you're trying to run your fridge or freezer off of alternative power, a power station or whatever, you're going to want to conserve that resource. So these can help with that as well, because what you're going to do is set your limits on here at a bottom limit and an upper limit, because we don't need that. Normally our freezers are set at 0, and that's for a good reason, because when you put something warm in that freezer, it's going to warm that whole area up, and then it's going to cool it back down. When we're in a time of crisis, we don't want to expend the resources that it's going to take to keep that at 0 degrees. We can still keep it at 25 degrees and it's still freezing, but we haven't expended all that energy to keep it there. We can set this to alarm at, say, 25 degrees, and that says, okay, time to plug this thing in again. We plug it in, we get it back down to 15 or 20 degrees, and then we can unplug it and let it do its thing until it gets up there again. So we're consuming a lot less energy when we do that. And part of that is because of the second law of thermodynamics. And you can see on this chart, I've put a couple of situations in here. The first one showing you've got a 100-degree garage, probably not the ideal place for a freezer, but that's where a lot of us have to put them. And you've got that freezer trying to keep it at 0 degrees. So you've got a very steep gradient. The second law of thermodynamics says the steeper this line, the faster heat is going to transfer. And so what we want to do is flatten that line, and what we're doing if we keep it at 25 degrees instead of 0 is we've now flattened that line a little bit. So it's doing two things. We're using less energy to keep the food safe, and we're slowing that rate of heat infiltration. That is critically important. You can see the other situation is one where you've got it in a nice cool basement. Let's say that basement's at 60 degrees and you're keeping normally at 0. You've got that gradient, but when we change the freezer temperature from 0 to 25, we've flattened that line so you can see that we are using a lot less energy because there's less heat infiltration. That heat transfer is slowing down. In summary, everyone should have one of these, and that's just day-to-day life. This is going to make all the difference in a crisis, allowing you to use a lot less energy to keep your food resources safe. Now for the question of the day. What other cool prepper tools do you want to share with us? Comment below. And thanks for being part of the solution.